name is Caesar, and I'm 32 years old. Family has always been my priority. When my younger sister Serena lost her apartment, I immediately offered her my spare room in the house I had just bought. What was meant to be a temporary stay of a few months stretched into 2 full years. I never expected much gratitude, but I definitely didn't expect what I overheard that Tuesday afternoon. My sister, living rent-free in my house, called Emmy a freeloader to her boyfriend. The irony would be funny if it hadn't broken my heart. Before I dive into this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if family drama gets your attention. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how I handled this situation. Growing up, Serena and I were as close as siblings could be despite our 3-year age gap. She was my shadow, following me everywhere with admiration in her eyes. I was her protector, the one who scared away the neighborhood bullies and taught her how to ride a bike without training wheels. Our childhood was mostly happy, filled with family vacations to the beach, weekend barbecues in the backyard, and holiday traditions that we cherished. Everything changed when I turned 15 and Serena was 12. Our parents sat us down one evening after dinner and announced they were getting a divorce. The news hit us like a truck. While they promised nothing would change in how much they loved us, practically everything else in our lives was about to be turned upside down. As our parents became consumed with their messy divorce proceedings, lawyer meetings, and their own emotional turmoil, I stepped up to be there for Serena. Mom was often crying in her bedroom, and Dad had moved to an apartment across town where he buried himself in work. Neither seemed to notice how lost Serena was becoming. I still remember finding her sitting alone in the backyard, tears streaming down her face after Mom and Dad had another screaming match over the phone. I sat beside her, put my arm around her shoulders, and promised I would always be there for her. That moment seemed to cement our new dynamic. I became her rock, her constant in a world where everything else was shifting. While trying to be strong for Serena, I also focused on my own path. I maintained straight, as in school, joined the debate team, and started working weekends at the local grocery store. I wanted to set an example for her, to show her that we could create stability for ourselves despite what was happening with our parents. But something unexpected began to happen. Instead of following my example of self-reliance, Serena started to rely entirely on me. When she had problems with homework, she wouldn't try to figure it out herself first. When she argued with friends, she expected me to mediate. When she needed money for school supplies, she came to me before asking our parents. As we grew older, this pattern only intensified. I pursued computer science in college, landed internships that led to a promising career in software development. Meanwhile, Serena bounced between majors before settling on communications, only to struggle finding direction after graduation. She moved from job to job, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months. The first time Serena asked to borrow money was during her sophomore year of college. Her car had broken down, and she needed $800 for repairs. I had just received my first bonus at work and didn't hesitate to help. She promised to pay me back over the next few months, but that never happened. Instead, she called a few months later needing help with rent. What started as occasional financial assistance became a pattern. Serena would call in a panic about some financial emergency. I would swoop in to help, and the repayment would never materialize. Each time, I told myself I was just being a good brother. Each time, I convinced myself that the next time would be different. Looking back, I realize I was enabling a destructive pattern. I thought I was teaching her that family takes care of each other, but what I was actually teaching her was that she didn't need to be responsible because someone else would always clean up her messes. And that someone was usually me. Our parents, having finally settled into an amicable post-divorce relationship, noticed this dynamic, but said nothing to discourage it. If anything, they seemed relieved that Serena had me to rely on, as if it absolved them of some of their parental duties. Mom would often tell me how wonderful I was for helping my sister, and Dad would proudly tell his friends about his son who always looked out for family. What none of us realized was that this well-intentioned support was setting us up for the conflict that would eventually tear us apart. By the time Serena reached her late 20s, the foundation of our relationship was built on an unhealthy pattern of dependence that had become so normalized neither of us questioned it anymore. It was a rainy Friday evening when I got the call. I was just leaving the office after a long week of debugging a critical software issue when my phone rang with Serena's name flashing on the screen. I knew immediately something was wrong. She rarely called on Fridays, usually too busy with friends or dates. "Caesar, I need help," she sobbed into the phone. "They're going to evict me, I don't know what to do. I pulled into a nearby parking lot and listened as she explained through tears that she'd lost her marketing assistant job 2 months ago and hadn't been able to pay rent. She claimed she'd been on dozens of interviews, but nothing had panned out. Now her landlord had given her final notice. She had less than a week to vacate the apartment. I've been too embarrassed to tell anyone, she confessed. I kept thinking I'd find something in time, but now I'm out of options. I have nowhere to go. The timing was almost serendipitous. I had just closed on my first house the month before, a modest 3-bedroom in a nice neighborhood that represented years of saving and hard work. I had been planning to use the spare bedrooms as a home office and gym, but those plans could wait. You can stay with me until you get back on your feet, I offered, already calculating how to rearrange my budget to accommodate another person. But Serena, this has to be temporary, and you need to be actively looking for work. The relief in her voice was palpable. Oh my God, Caesar, you're literally saving my life right now. I promise I won't be a burden. I'll find a job as soon as possible and be out of your hair before you know it. We met for coffee the next day to discuss logistics. Serena looked exhausted, dark circles under her red-rimmed eyes, her normally styled hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. As we sat in the corner of the busy cafe, I outlined my conditions. You can stay for 3 months, rent-free, while you find a job, I explained. After that, if you're still needing to stay, we'll work out a fair rent amount. I'll need you to contribute to utilities and groceries once you're employed. And I need to see that you're actually applying for jobs, Serena. I'm not going to support you indefinitely. She nodded eagerly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I understand completely. Honestly, I'm just so grateful. You have no idea what this means to me. I've been having panic attacks thinking about living in my car. The next day, I helped her move her belongings into my spare bedroom. She didn't have much, just clothes, some personal items, and a few pieces of furniture that we stored in the garage. As we carried the last box inside, Serena hugged me tightly. I'm going to make this up to you, she promised, and I'll be the perfect housemate you'll see. For the first few weeks, things went relatively smoothly. Serena kept the common areas tidy, cooked dinner occasionally, and spent most days on her laptop, supposedly applying for jobs. She showed me her updated resume and cover letter, and I even helped her prepare for a couple of interviews she had scheduled. But by the 1-month mark, I began noticing concerning patterns. The interviews never seemed to lead anywhere, and new ones became increasingly rare. When I asked how many applications she'd submitted that week, her answers became vague. The job market is so competitive right now, she'd say, or I'm focusing on quality applications over quantity. I tried to be understanding. Job hunting was demoralizing, and I remembered my own struggles after college, but something felt off. When I came home early one day, I found Serena binge-watching a new show, her laptop closed beside her. Taking a mental health break, she explained with a sheepish smile. Been at it all morning. The first real red flag came when I returned from a business trip to find my house transformed. Serena had rearranged the living room furniture, replaced my minimal decor with her more bohemian style, and filled the refrigerator with foods I never ate. When I expressed surprise, she seemed genuinely confused. I thought you'd like it better this way, she said. This place needed a woman's touch. I let it go, not wanting to seem ungrateful for her attempts to contribute, but it bothered me that she hadn't asked first. It was my house, after all. The boundaries between host and guest were beginning to blur in her mind. Then came the incident with my laptop. I had left it on the kitchen table while making a quick phone call in the backyard. When I returned, there was a puddle of water next to it, the edge of my keyboard damp. Oh, I accidentally knocked over my water, Serena admitted when confronted. But I cleaned it up right away. It's fine. Fortunately, my computer was undamaged, but her casual attitude about potentially destroying my work tool concerned me. She didn't seem to grasp the seriousness of what could have happened. As the weeks passed, more small incidents accumulated. She began inviting friends over without warning me first. I'd come home to find strangers in my living room, drinking my beer and using my things. Once, I found someone sleeping on my couch when I came down for breakfast. That's just Tyler, Serena explained, as if finding a strange man in my living room should be perfectly normal. He crashed here after we got back from the bar. You were already asleep. With each boundary crossed, I felt increasingly uncomfortable in my own home. But every time I tried to address these issues, Serena would either become defensive or turn on the waterworks, making me feel like the villain for having reasonable expectations. I thought you wanted me to feel at home here, she would say, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't realize I was such a burden to you. And so I would back down, telling myself it was temporary, that once she found a job, things would improve. But as the 3-month mark approached with no sign of employment on the horizon, I began to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake. 6 months into what was supposed to be a 3-month arrangement, I found myself in a situation I never imagined. Serena had completely abandoned any pretense of actively job hunting. My once peaceful home had become a source of constant stress, and my bank account was feeling the strain of supporting 2 adults on 1 income. The financial burden was becoming unbearable. My mortgage payment alone took a significant chunk of my monthly income, and now I was covering twice the utilities, groceries, and household supplies. When I suggested Serena might contribute from her savings or look for even part-time work to help with expenses, she acted as if I had asked her to donate a kidney. I can't believe you're nickel and diming me when I'm going through the hardest time of my life, she said, her voice dripping with wounded indignation. What happened to stay as long as you need? I never said stay as long as you need, I corrected her. I said 3 months to get back on your feet. She rolled her eyes. Whatever. You know I'm good for it once I find the right job. I'm not going to settle for just anything. That was another change I had noticed. In the beginning, Serena had been willing to consider any position that would pay the bills. Now, she dismissed potential opportunities as beneath her qualifications or not aligned with her career goals. It seemed the longer she stayed unemployed, the higher her standards became. More troubling than the financial strain was the shift in Serena's attitude. The gratitude and humility she had shown when first moving in had evaporated completely. She now acted as if living in my house rent-free was her birthright. She complained about the water pressure in the shower, the brand of coffee I bought, and the fact that the neighbor's dog barked too early in the morning, as if these minor inconveniences were personal affronts I had engineered to make her life difficult. Then Tyler entered the picture more permanently. What had started as occasional crashing on the couch had evolved into him practically living at my house. He was there when I left for work in the morning, and still there when I returned in the evening. Sometimes I would come home to find them both gone, only to discover they had taken my car without asking because Tyler's was in the shop again. Tyler was 27, perpetually between jobs, with an endless supply of get-rich-quick schemes that never materialized. He fancied himself an entrepreneur, but seemed allergic to actual work. He would talk for hours about cryptocurrency investments and dropshipping businesses while eating food I had paid for and drinking my beer. The first time I found his dirty laundry mixed in with the household washing, I confronted Serena directly. Your boyfriend is not a tenant here, I said firmly. He cannot treat this place like his home. Serena's response was to laugh. Don't be so uptight, Caesar. Tyler's going through a rough patch too. We're helping each other through it. I agreed to help you, not him, I reminded her. And neither of you seems to be making progress toward independence. This led to our first major argument. Serena accused me of being controlling and jealous of her relationship. She claimed I had never liked any of her boyfriends and suggested that perhaps I was lonely and resentful of her happiness. The accusation was so absurd, it left me speechless. I had been dating Sarah for nearly a year, though I rarely brought her to the house anymore due to the uncomfortable atmosphere Serena and Tyler created. After that fight, I tried to establish clearer house rules. I wrote them down and posted them on the refrigerator like we were college roommates instead of adults in their 30s. No guests staying over without prior approval. Clean up common areas after use. No borrowing my car without asking. Contribute to household supplies. Serena took one look at the list and snorted. Are you serious with this? What's next? A chore wheel? Room inspections? I'm just trying to make this situation workable, I explained, keeping my voice level. These aren't unreasonable expectations. Whatever you say, landlord, she replied with a mock salute. The rules lasted approximately 3 days before being completely ignored. Tyler was back to staying over 5 nights a week. The kitchen was constantly left with dirty dishes. My car was taken without permission twice more. When I brought up these violations, Serena would either deny them or make empty promises to do better. My home no longer felt like my own. I started spending more time at the office or at Sarah's apartment just to avoid the tension. When I did come home, I often retreated to my bedroom immediately, the only space that remained truly mine. I found myself resenting my sister more with each passing day, and then feeling guilty about that resentment. After all, she was family. You're supposed to help family. But at what point does helping become enabling? At what point does family obligation end and self-preservation begin. I was quickly approaching that point of no return, though I didn't realize it yet. All I knew was that something had to give. I couldn't continue living like this indefinitely. The frustration was affecting my work, my relationship, my mental health. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone bitter and angry all the time. What I didn't know then was that the breaking point was just around the corner, and it would come in a way I never could have anticipated. The day that changed everything started normally enough. I woke up, made coffee, and left for the office while Serena was still asleep. I had a meeting scheduled with an important client at 1 o'clock, but just as I was preparing my presentation, my phone pinged with a message from the client's assistant. The meeting needed to be rescheduled due to a family emergency. Suddenly finding myself with an unexpected free afternoon, I decided to head home and use the time to catch up on some household projects. It was around 2:30 when I pulled into my driveway, noticing Tyler's beat-up Honda parked on the street. I sighed, already dreading whatever mess I might find inside. I entered quietly through the side door that led directly into the kitchen, not intentionally trying to sneak in but not announcing myself either. It was my house after all. I didn't think I needed to call ahead to come home in the middle of the day. As I set my laptop bag on the kitchen counter, I heard voices from the living room. Serena and Tyler were talking, their tones animated and punctuated by occasional laughter. I was about to walk in and let them know I was home when I heard my name. "Caesar has always been like this," Serena was saying, her voice carrying clearly through the open floor plan. "He acts all successful and self-made, but he's really just a freeloader who got everything handed to him by our parents." I froze, unable to believe what I was hearing. "How so?" Tyler asked, sounding genuinely curious. "Our parents paid for his college completely. They bought him his first car. They co-signed for his first apartment." Her voice took on a mocking quality. "Oh, look at me. I'm Caesar. I worked so hard for everything I have. Everyone should be more like me." My heart pounded in my chest. Yes, our parents had helped with college, but I had worked part-time throughout my 4 years to cover living expenses. The car she referred to was a 15-year-old Honda with 200,000 miles that I had paid for half of. And the co-signed apartment was necessary because I had no credit history at 22, but I had never missed a payment. Meanwhile, Serena continued, "They barely helped me at all. It's always been that way. Caesar, the golden child who can do no wrong, and me, the screw-up who needs to try harder." "That's messed up," Tyler sympathized. "But hey, at least we're getting some benefit now. Free food, free lodging. We should stick around as long as possible." They both laughed, and I felt something break inside me. All this time, I had been stretching myself thin financially, emotionally, and mentally to help my sister, and this was how she saw me? As some privileged freeloader? The irony was so painful it made me physically sick. I must have made some noise because the conversation suddenly stopped. A moment later, Serena poked her head into the kitchen, her expression shifting from surprise to forced cheerfulness. "Caesar, what are you doing home so early?" I couldn't even pretend. "I heard you," I said, my voice unnaturally calm despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "I heard what you said about me." Her face paled slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, that? We were just joking around. Don't be so sensitive." "Joking?" I repeated. "You called me a freeloader while you're literally living rent-free in my house. You accused me of having everything handed to me while you haven't contributed a single dollar to this household in 6 months." Tyler appeared behind her, looking uncomfortable but not particularly apologetic. "Hey man, chill. It wasn't that serious." Something about his cavalier attitude made my blood boil. "This doesn't concern you," I told him firmly. "In fact, I think you should leave. Now." "He doesn't have to leave," Serena interjected, crossing her arms. "He's my guest." "No, Serena. He's not a guest anymore. He practically lives here, eats my food, uses my utilities, and apparently laughs about taking advantage of the situation." I turned back to Tyler. "So yes, you need to leave. Right now." Instead of complying, Tyler took a step forward, puffing out his chest slightly. "Look, I understand you're upset, but you can't just kick me out. I know my rights." His rights? In my house? That was the moment something fundamental shifted in me. The absurdity of his statement, the entitlement it revealed, crystallized everything that had been wrong about this arrangement from the beginning. "Your rights?" I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You have exactly 0 rights here. You don't pay rent. Your name isn't on any documents. You're not even an official guest. You're a parasite." Caesar, Serena gasped, as if I were the one being unreasonable. And you, I turned to her, years of suppressed frustration finally boiling over. You have the audacity to call me a freeloader? You, who hasn't held a job in over 6 months? You, who hasn't contributed a single penny to this household? You, who invited your freeloading boyfriend to take advantage of my generosity without even asking? Serena's face hardened. I have every right to speak my mind in my own home. But that's just it, Serena. This isn't your home. It's mine. I bought it. I pay for it. I maintain it. You're a guest who has long overstayed her welcome. So what are you saying? She demanded, tears starting to form in her eyes. The familiar manipulation tactic that had worked so many times before. Not this time. I'm saying it's time for you to find somewhere else to live. Both of you. I've had enough. Tyler scoffed. You can't just throw us out on the street. There are laws against that. We've established residency. You'd have to formally evict us, and that takes months. The smug look on his face as he said this, the calculated awareness of exactly how they could continue to take advantage of me legally, was the final straw. In that moment, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding or a temporary rough patch in our relationship. This was who my sister had become, or perhaps who she had always been beneath the surface. Get out of my sight, I said quietly. Both of you. Stay in the guest room if you want, but stay out of my way while I figure out exactly what I need to do to legally remove you from my home. As I turned to leave the kitchen, Serena called after me, her voice suddenly small. Caesar, wait, we can talk about this. But for the first time in our relationship, I didn't turn back at the sound of her distress. I didn't rush to fix her problems or smooth things over. I walked away, got in my car, and drove to the only place I could think of where I might get some clarity, my lawyer's office. The offices of Palmer and Associates were housed in a modest brick building downtown. I had used their services when purchasing my home, and though I had never imagined I would need them for something like this, Janet Palmer had given me her card with the words, "Call me for anything," scrawled on the back. I hadn't made an appointment, but luck was on my side. Janet had just finished with a client and had a 45-minute window before her next meeting. When her assistant ushered me into her office, she took one look at my face and closed the door behind me. Whatever it is, it's not good, she observed, gesturing for me to sit. Tell me what's going on. I explained the situation as concisely as I could, trying to stick to the facts without letting my emotions color the narrative too much. Janet listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she tapped her pen against her desk thoughtfully. Unfortunately, your sister's boyfriend is partially correct, she said. In this state, once someone has lived in a residence for 30 days, they establish tenancy rights even without a formal lease or rent payments. They're considered month-to-month tenants at that point. My heart sank. So I'm stuck with them? Not at all, Janet clarified. It just means you have to follow the legal process for eviction. Since there's no lease violation at issue here, you would proceed with a 30-day notice to vacate. If they don't leave at the end of that period, we file for an unlawful detainer action with the court. She walked me through the entire process, explaining each step and the potential timelines. Best case scenario, if Serena and Tyler left after receiving the official notice, the matter would be resolved in a month. Worst case, if they fought the eviction through every available legal channel, it could take 3 to 4 months. I recommend documenting everything from this point forward, Janet advised. Any property damage, any threatening behavior, any violations of house rules. Take photos. Keep a journal with dates and times. If there's any way to show they pose a threat to you or your property, we might be able to expedite the process. As we discussed strategy, another concern occurred to me. What about my personal belongings? Some of my things have already gone missing. You should secure your valuables immediately, she said gravely. Once people know they're being evicted, they sometimes become vindictive. I've seen cases where departing tenants have done significant damage to property or taken items that don't belong to them. By the end of our meeting, I had a clear action plan. Janet would prepare the formal eviction notice to be served the following day. In the meantime, I needed to protect myself and my possessions. My first stop after leaving the lawyer's office was a storage facility. I rented a small unit and then drove to a nearby apartment complex that advertised short-term leases. I put down a deposit on a one-bedroom apartment that I could move into immediately. It wasn't ideal and would stretch my budget to be paying both a mortgage and rent, but it seemed the safest option. Next, I called a locksmith, and arranged for them to meet me at my house the following day to change the locks after the eviction notice was served. Janet had explained that while I couldn't legally lock Serena and Tyler out of the house during the eviction process, I could restrict access to certain rooms. With the practical matters arranged, I faced the most difficult task, calling my parents. I knew Serena would contact them as soon as she received the eviction notice, and I wanted them to hear my side first. I sat in my car in the apartment complex parking lot and dialed my father's number. "Dad, I have something important to tell you," I began after exchanging brief pleasantries. I explained the situation as factually as possible, including what I had overheard and the fact that Serena had made no efforts to find employment or contribute to the household. His response was disappointing but not surprising. "Caesar, she's your sister. Families help each other through tough times. I'm sure she didn't mean what you heard." "Dad, she's been living with me for 6 months with no end in sight. This wasn't temporary help through a rough patch. This was exploitation. She's going through a difficult phase," he insisted. "Where is she supposed to go? She's 29 years old," I reminded him. "Finding housing is her responsibility, not mine, and she has options. She could get a job, any job, and rent a room somewhere. She could move in with Tyler or his family. She could even ask you or Mom." There was a telling silence at that suggestion. Neither of my parents wanted Serena living with them, but they were perfectly comfortable with her indefinitely imposing on me. "Just try to work it out," he finally said. "Be the bigger person. That's what family does." The call with my mother went similarly, though she was slightly more sympathetic to my position. Still, her parting words were, "Don't do anything you'll regret, Caesar. She's still your sister, and blood is thicker than water." I hung up feeling frustrated and unsupported. The very people who had raised us to be responsible and self-sufficient were now encouraging me to continue enabling Serena's dependency. It made no sense. Seeking perspective from someone who might actually be on my side, I called my girlfriend, Sarah. Unlike my parents, she had witnessed firsthand how Serena's presence had affected me over the past months. "You're doing the right thing," she assured me after I explained my plan. "This isn't about abandoning family. It's about setting healthy boundaries. Serena needs this wake-up call." "My parents don't see it that way," I sighed. "Your parents haven't been living with her," Sarah pointed out. "They haven't seen what it's been doing to you. You're exhausted all the time, you're stressed, you're unhappy in your own home. That's not sustainable, and it's not helping Serena in the long run either." Sarah's validation strengthened my resolve. After hanging up, I drove to my house to collect some essential items before Serena and Tyler returned. I packed enough clothes and personal items for a few weeks, my important documents, and the few family heirlooms and valuables I had. Everything else would have to wait until the eviction was complete. As I was leaving, I took one last look around the home I had worked so hard to buy. It no longer felt like mine. The furniture was rearranged to Serena's liking. Her clothes were draped over chairs. Tyler's gaming console dominated the living room entertainment center. Even the smell was different, a mixture of Serena's perfume and the scented candles she burned constantly despite knowing they gave me headaches. I locked the door behind me, knowing that tomorrow would change everything. The lawyer would serve the eviction notice at 10 a.m. I would return with the locksmith at 11, and then the real battle would begin. As I drove to my temporary apartment, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. There was anger and hurt, certainly, but also an unexpected sense of relief. For too long, I had allowed my sense of obligation to override my own well-being. Tomorrow would be the first step in reclaiming my life, and, though it didn't feel like it yet, possibly the first step in helping Serena reclaim hers as well. The next morning dawned clear and cold, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in my personal life. I met Janet's associate, a tall man named Marcus, who specialized in serving legal notices, outside my house at precisely 10 a.m. He carried a manila envelope containing the formal 30-day notice to vacate. "Do you want to be present for this?" Marcus asked me. I shook my head. "I'll wait down the street. Let me know when it's done." I watched from my car as Marcus rang the doorbell. After a long moment, Serena answered, still in her pajamas despite it being mid-morning. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see her face transform from confusion to shock to anger as Marcus explained who he was and handed her the envelope. She tried to hand it back, but he simply walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway clutching the notice. My phone rang almost immediately. "Is this a joke?" Serena demanded without preamble. "You're actually trying to evict me? Your own sister?" "It's not a joke," I replied calmly. You have 30 days to find other living arrangements. You can't do this to me. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore, Serena. You've had 6 months to figure that out. She let out a sound of pure frustration. I'm calling Mom and Dad. They'll make you see reason. They already know, I informed her. I spoke to them yesterday. That seemed to take some wind out of her sails, but only momentarily. Well, they agree with me that this is ridiculous. We're family, Caesar. Families don't throw each other out on the street. Families also don't take advantage of each other and call each other freeloaders behind their backs. Oh my God, are you still hung up on that? It was just venting. Everyone says things they don't mean sometimes. I took a deep breath, determined not to be pulled into another circular argument. The notice has been served. You have 30 days. I suggest you use that time to find somewhere to go, rather than wasting it trying to change my mind. We're not leaving, she declared defiantly. Tyler says you can't actually force us out without going to court, and that could take months. By then, you'll have come to your senses. Her smug certainty that I would eventually cave confirmed I was making the right decision. Then I'll see you in court, I said, and hung up. 10 minutes later, I met the locksmith at the house. Serena was waiting, her arms crossed, Tyler standing behind her looking equally confrontational. What's going on? She demanded, as the locksmith took out his tools. I'm having the locks changed, I explained. You'll be given a key to the front door only. My bedroom and home office will be off limits. You can't lock me out of parts of my own home. My home, I corrected her. And yes, according to my lawyer, I can secure private areas while still providing you access to common spaces, bathroom, and your bedroom during the eviction period. Tyler stepped forward. This is harassment. We could sue you for this. I turned to him, my patience completely exhausted. Go ahead, get a lawyer. In the meantime, you have 30 days to find a new place to squat. The locksmith worked quickly, replacing the locks on my bedroom and office doors, while Serena and Tyler glared at me. I followed him around, making sure they didn't interfere. When he finished, he handed me the new keys. Is there anything else you need today? He asked. No, thank you. That's all. As soon as the locksmith left, Serena exploded. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything we've been through together, I'm your sister. I was there for you when Sarah broke up with you last year. I helped you move into this house. I've cooked for you, cleaned for you, and I've provided you with free housing, paid all the bills, bought all the groceries, and tolerated your boyfriend practically moving in without my permission, I countered. The difference is, I never agreed to do those things indefinitely. So that's it? You're just cutting me off completely? Not completely. You have 30 days of housing that I'm legally required to provide. After that, yes, you're on your own. Tears filled her eyes, but for once, they didn't move me. I had seen this performance too many times. What happened to you? She whispered. You used to care about me. I still care about you, I said honestly. That's why I can't continue enabling behavior that's harmful to both of us. You're better than this, Serena. You're capable of standing on your own feet. You just haven't had to. She shook her head, the tears now streaming down her face. You'll regret this. When you need me someday, and I'm not there, you'll regret throwing me away like trash. It was a classic Serena statement, simultaneously playing the victim while making a threat. I simply nodded, turned, and walked out of the house that no longer felt like home. The next 30 days were a war of attrition. Serena and Tyler made no effort to find new housing. Instead, they seemed determined to make my life as difficult as possible, perhaps hoping I would rescind the eviction out of sheer exhaustion. They threw loud parties that resulted in noise complaints from neighbors. They stopped cleaning entirely, allowing dishes to pile up and garbage to overflow. When I came to check on the property, I found empty beer cans, food containers, and cigarette butts strewn everywhere. They ran up the utility bills by leaving lights on constantly and taking hour-long showers. Every few days, Serena would attempt a new angle to make me change my mind. First came rage, with screaming phone calls and texts calling me every name in the book. When that didn't work, she tried guilt, sending long messages reminiscing about our childhood and how I had promised to always be there for her. When guilt failed, she attempted bargaining, suddenly claiming she had job prospects and would start paying rent soon if I would just give her another chance. Through it all, I maintained my distance, only communicating through my lawyer when absolutely necessary. Janet filed the unlawful detainer action with the court when the 30 days expired, and Serena and Tyler refused to leave. A court date was set for 3 weeks later. 2 days before we were due in court, I drove by the house and noticed something alarming. My garage door was open. I had specifically kept it locked because some of my tools and belongings were stored there. I pulled into the driveway and found Tyler loading items into his car. My items, my power tools, my camping gear, even the vintage turntable I had inherited from our grandfather. I called the police immediately. When they arrived, Tyler tried to claim I had given him permission to borrow the items. The officers were skeptical, especially when I produced receipts and family photos showing the items were indeed mine. They made him unload everything, but didn't arrest him, considering it a civil matter related to the ongoing eviction. That night, I hired a security guard to watch the house until the court hearing. It was an additional expense I couldn't really afford, but the thought of returning to find my home stripped bare was worse. The court hearing itself was mercifully straightforward. Serena and Tyler didn't even bother to show up, apparently thinking their absence would delay the proceedings. Instead, the judge granted the eviction order in less than 20 minutes. 2 days later, I stood beside a sheriff's deputy as he posted the final eviction notice on my front door. Serena and Tyler now had 24 hours to remove their belongings before they would be legally removed from the property. They waited until the absolute last minute. 23 hours after the notice was posted, they finally began loading their things into Tyler's car and a friend's pickup truck. I watched from across the street, not wanting a confrontation, but needing to ensure they didn't take anything else that wasn't theirs. As the last box was loaded, Serena spotted me. She marched across the street, her face a mask of cold fury. "I hope you're happy," she spat. "You've destroyed our family." "No, Serena. I just refuse to let you destroy me." She laughed bitterly. "Always the victim, aren't you? Poor Caesar, so put upon by his terrible sister. Well, don't worry. You won't have to deal with me anymore. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a brother." Her words stung despite everything, but I maintained my composure. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I truly hope you find your feet and build a good life. I just can't be the one to carry you anymore." She turned away without another word, got into Tyler's car, and they drove off, leaving me alone on the sidewalk outside the home I could finally reclaim. The next day, I entered my house with trepidation, unsure what state I would find it in. My worst fears were realized. The place had been trashed. There were stains on the carpet, holes in the walls, broken dishes in the kitchen. The guest bathroom toilet was clogged with what looked like an intentionally flushed t-shirt. The refrigerator had been left open, spoiling what food remained inside. But the most painful discovery came when I entered my bedroom, now accessible with my new key. My dresser drawers had been pulled out and emptied onto the floor. Clothes were strewn everywhere, and the small lockbox where I kept my most precious possessions had been forced open. Inside, I had kept 3 irreplaceable items: my grandfather's watch, a medal I had won in a national programming competition, and a handwritten letter from our grandmother before she passed away. All 3 were gone. In their place was a note in Serena's handwriting: "Family heirlooms should stay with family. Since you decided I'm not family anymore, why should you get to keep these?" It was in that moment, looking at her vindictive note, that I finally accepted a painful truth. The sister I had loved and protected since childhood was gone. Whether she had ever truly existed, or had always been this person beneath the surface, I couldn't say. But the relationship I had cherished was broken beyond repair. 3 months after the eviction, I stood in what had once been Serena's bedroom, now transformed into the home office I had originally planned. The walls were freshly painted, the floors refinished, all traces of damage repaired. The rest of the house had similarly been restored, with new furniture replacing items that couldn't be salvaged, and a complete deep cleaning that had finally eliminated the lingering smell of cigarettes and spoiled food. Physically, my home had recovered. Emotionally, I was still working on it. The weeks following the eviction had been a strange mix of relief and grief. Relief to have my space back, to no longer walk on eggshells in my own home, to not worry about my possessions disappearing or bills suddenly doubling. But also grief for the relationship lost, for the sister who had once looked at me with admiration instead of resentment, for the family bond I had believed was unbreakable. My parents had been caught in the middle, initially angry with me for the eviction, but gradually coming to understand my position as the full extent of Serena's behavior came to light. The theft of the family heirlooms had been particularly shocking to them. Dad had tried to get Serena to return them, but she refused to even admit she had taken them. As for Serena herself, I had heard little directly. Through the family grapevine, I knew she and Tyler had broken up a few weeks after the eviction. Apparently, his interest had waned once there was no more free housing to exploit. She had moved in with a friend temporarily, then found a room to rent in a shared house. I was in the midst of organizing my new office space when I came across a box I hadn't opened since the move. It contained miscellaneous items from the guest room that I hadn't sorted through yet. Inside, wedged between some old magazines and a forgotten sweater, was a small leather-bound book. Serena's journal. I hesitated, my hand hovering over it. Reading someone else's private thoughts felt wrong, invasive. But this was also potentially a window into understanding what had gone so terribly wrong between us. After a moment's consideration, I picked it up. The entries were sporadic, some dated years ago, others more recent. As I read, a pattern emerged that made my heart ache. Entry after entry described Serena's feelings of inadequacy compared to me. Caesar got another promotion today. Meanwhile, I got rejected from another job. Mom called to tell me how Caesar just bought a new car. She didn't even ask how I was doing. Christmas dinner was all about Caesar's accomplishments. No one even noticed I'd been taking night classes. There was jealousy there, certainly, but also genuine pain. From her perspective, she had spent her life in my shadow, constantly being measured against my achievements, and found wanting. What I had seen as setting a good example, she had experienced as an impossible standard. One entry in particular, dated shortly after she moved in with me, stood out. Living with Caesar is harder than I expected. He's so put together, so responsible. He makes it all look so easy. Why is everything such a struggle for me? Why can't I get my life on track the way he has? Sometimes I think he helps me just so he can feel superior. He probably looks down on me for needing his help. I hate feeling this way. I hate being the screw-up. Maybe Tyler's right. Maybe I should just enjoy the free ride for a while. At least then I'm getting something out of being the family disappointment. I closed the journal, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Her perspective was distorted, unfair in many ways, but not entirely without merit. Had I sometimes felt superior when helping her? Had I offered assistance with a subtle undercurrent of judgment? Had I, in trying to be a good example, inadvertently contributed to her sense of inadequacy? These weren't comfortable questions, but they were necessary ones. While nothing in the journal excused Serena's behavior or the way she had taken advantage of me, it did offer a glimpse into the underlying dynamics that had led us to this breaking point. The reality was that we had both played a role in creating this unhealthy relationship. I had enabled her dependency, perhaps partly out of a desire to be needed, to maintain my role as the responsible older brother. She had exploited my generosity, perhaps partly as a misguided way to balance what she perceived as an unfair power dynamic. This realization didn't immediately change anything. The hurt was still too fresh, the breach of trust too severe for instant reconciliation. But it did shift something in my perspective, softening the hard edge of anger I had been carrying. Instead of selling the house as I had considered doing to escape the bad memories, I decided to reclaim it completely. The home office was just the beginning. I renovated the kitchen, replaced the living room furniture, and created a small workout space in what had been the garage. I also made a decision about my career. The company I worked for had been pushing for me to take on a leadership role that would involve mentoring junior developers. I had been hesitant, unsure if I had anything valuable to teach. Now, I accepted the position, discovering that I had a talent for guiding others without making them feel inadequate in the process. 6 months after finding the journal, I heard through my mother that Serena had enrolled in a vocational training program for medical coding. It was a practical choice, offering stable employment prospects and utilizing her attention to detail. For the first time in years, she seemed to be finding her own path rather than floundering in reaction to others. On her birthday, after much consideration, I sent a card with a simple message: "Proud of your new direction, wishing you success, Caesar." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, not yet. It was an acknowledgement that despite everything, I still cared what happened to her. It was a small opening in a door that had seemed permanently closed. I don't know if we'll ever fully repair our relationship. Some wounds cut too deep for perfect healing. But I've learned something profound through this painful experience. True love sometimes means setting boundaries, even with family. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their actions. And perhaps most importantly, I've learned that helping others should never come at the expense of your own well-being. Like the airplane oxygen mask instruction, you have to secure your own before assisting others. Otherwise, you both end up suffocating. Looking back at our childhood promise, when I told a 12-year-old Serena that I would always be there for her, I realize now that I had misunderstood what that should mean. Being there for someone doesn't mean carrying them through life. It means standing beside them as they walk their own path, offering a hand when they stumble but not carrying their weight indefinitely. I hope someday Serena and I can build a new relationship based on mutual respect rather than dependency. I hope we can both learn to see each other clearly, not through the distorted lens of childhood roles and expectations. I hope we can be siblings in a healthy way, supporting each other's independence rather than enabling dysfunction. Until then, I'm focusing on my own growth and healing. The house that was once a battleground has become a sanctuary again. The pain that once consumed me has become a teacher, and the boundaries I once felt guilty about establishing have become the foundation for a healthier way of loving, not just Serena, but everyone in my life. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did it affect your relationship in the long run? Drop a comment below and share your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most important growth. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that true strength often lies in knowing when to help and when to step back.